Good evening and welcome to Freedom Speech and You. I'm your host, Ken, and we are ready to go. I hope the audience shows up, but if they don't, they can watch it later. I think Trucker John is out there, and so are you out there, Trucker John? I think you are. Let's get right into the topics. So I'm going to start off with a Glenn Kirshner clip. And getting this one to go. Gonna just let it roll where you can't see it. So that I can get it ready. Since it's a YouTube clip, I've got to let it kind of run its course to get it where I want it to start it. Is there a way to, I don't know if there's a way to get it. I guess I'm just going to have to loop it because it's hard to play a clip from beginning to end. So just going to have to play it the way. Hey, Trucker John. Play it the way it landed. Hey, Casper Northerner. Hey, welcome. So this is a clip from Glenn Kirshner. I think the levels are okay, but I'm gonna have to let it replay because I don't really, well, maybe if I down zoom it a bit, maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's zoomed and that's the problem. Okay, there's the.
Is also an
Is there a way to get that back?
Insurrectionist who headed to President Obama's home after Donald Trump posted President Obama's home address online. And this particular Trump supporter, this insurrectionist, headed to President Obama's home with 2 guns, 400 rounds of ammunition, and a machete. Here is the recent reporting from NBC News. Headline: January 6th defendant arrested near Obama's home had guns and 400 rounds of ammunition in his van. I am sick and tired of Donald Trump endangering our communities, endangering our society, endangering American democracy with nothing being done to address the danger. I don't know if you saw the recent reporting about a particular Trump supporter who is also an insurrectionist who headed to President Obama's home after Donald Trump posted President Obama's home address online. And this particular
Okay, so that's where it starts to repeat. But that's just something to get us started. I mean, that is just deplorable what Trump does, doxing the former president and sending people to attack him. Just really, really terrible. So I think this is the whole clip. Of course, getting it to stop. Sometimes it doesn't want to stop. Sometimes it just wants to start. So this is the whole story. That was the clip that got me alerted to wanting to cover this story. Did I leave it open? Yeah, I did. Okay. Okay.
So, friends, Donald Trump continues to endanger us all, up to and including another former president of the United States. Let's talk about that because justice matters.
Okay, so this is Justice Matters with Glenn Kirshner. We use it with permission, and we're going to discuss this topic in more detail now.
Hey, all. Glenn Kirshner here. So, friends, I don't know if you saw the recent reporting about a particular Trump supporter who is also an insurrectionist who headed to President Obama's home, his home address in Washington, D.C., after Donald Trump posted President Obama's home address online. And this particular Trump supporter, this insurrectionist, headed to President Obama's home with 2 guns, 400 rounds of ammunition, and a machete. Here is the recent reporting from NBC News. Headline: January 6 defendant arrested near Obama's home had guns and 400 rounds of ammunition in his van. And that article begins: a Trump supporter who stormed the Capitol wearing a "Make Space Great Again" hat had 2 guns and 400 rounds of ammunition in his van when he was arrested Thursday near former President Barack Obama's home, federal authorities said Friday.
So he had a make space great again. He must be a fan of the space program, possibly a Space Force, I guess.
A federal prosecutor said in court Friday that Taylor Taranto, a 37-year-old man first identified by online sleuths in August 2021, also had a machete in the van he appeared to be living in. Taranto's van has been parked near the D.C. jail in recent weeks, and he has appeared at protests in support of other January 6 defendants, videos on social media show.
So he's out there with these defendants of the Jan 6. You know, he's definitely one of those. Good evening, Nick Rich 56.
The prosecutor said that Taranto has been in Washington to take House Speaker Kevin McCarthy up on his offer of letting January 6 defendants review security footage of the Capitol riot relevant to their cases. Taranto had posted recordings of phone calls he made trying to get access to the footage to his social media.
That seems really bad. Let's just give them videos so they can remember to get their story straight instead of telling the story the way they remember it. That's not good, you know.
Taranto has acknowledged entering the Capitol on January 6th in social media posts and questioned why authorities had not arrested him. His lawyer did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Taranto showed up at Obama's residence on Thursday after former President Donald Trump posted screenshots on his Truth Social platform that featured a purported address for Obama's home in Washington. Taranto's account reposted Trump's post with President Obama's.
So Trucker John, make space great again. Yeah, I presume that means that, you know, this person supports Trump's exploitation of space with the Space Force, you know, thinks that what's going on right now is not good enough, and he wants Trump in charge of the space program, I guess. Good evening, Aaron West.
Home address. So, friends, let's recap. This guy is a Trump supporter. He's an insurrectionist who participated in the Capitol attack on January 6th. He came to D.C. in response to Kevin McCarthy's call, his invitation. Come to D.C. Review the security footage of January 6th. Maybe it will assist you, Mr. Insurrectionist, in your defense. Then Donald Trump posts President Barack Obama's home address here in Washington, D.C.
Just deplorable. No president should do that to a former president. A president should have a private address once the president is in or out of office. You know, nobody should know where they are. I mean, Trump is an idiot because he openly lets you know that he's in Mar-a-Lago when he's there, you know, all that sort of thing. But no other president is really that much of an idiot to go around and, you know, no former president acts like that, to go around and just, you know, flaunt the fact that he's in a particular place at a particular time.
This particular insurrectionist, Taylor Taranto, reposts it on his social media, and then he heads to President Obama's house. And as he is headed to President Obama's home, he is arrested with what? 2 guns, 400 rounds of ammunition, and a machete. You know, friends, I am sick and tired of Donald Trump endangering our communities, endangering our society, endangering American democracy, with nothing being done to address the danger. And of course, in a related story, as we discussed yesterday, leaders from around the world, you know, the heads of democracies around the globe are asking President Biden, why hasn't Donald Trump been held accountable for the insurrection? We don't know what President Biden tells them in reply. Donald Trump's continued supremely dangerous conduct, going unaddressed by our law enforcement authorities, is so infuriating. You know, it's so disheartening. It's so corrosive to the rule of law. It's the antithesis of justice. And justice matters. Friends, happy Independence Day. We fight on. As always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.
Okay, so that was Glenn's Independence Day video, or the day before, perhaps. So you can obviously tell that when he said Happy Independence Day. Trucker John says, I can remember when right-wingers would complain about NASA being a waste of their tax dollars. They probably still do in some respect in regard to the ISS and all that sort of thing, because they don't understand the scientific research going on there and the implications of it and how it helps humanity. And, you know, and this business of supporting space because of Trump, you know, is just the idea that Trump is supportive of Space Force. So they see it as, you know, an advancement of that old stuff that Reagan used to talk about, the Star Wars technology, controlling space so as to control the world. That's what they see it as, because they're all fearful of whatever's going on, and they don't trust the existing military agencies. So so we just got through that. Okay. I can talk about a lot of different things. I would like to talk about something that happened this week that is non-political. So I'm going to go to this topic first. So I'm going to show you this video from 10 years ago. And what happened this week was Dr. Susan Love, a cancer doctor, cancer researcher, died. And this is Dr. Love talking approximately 10 years ago. So let's look at this. She's talking about...
I have recently become very frustrated that we're not making more progress in breast cancer. You know, we've raised all this money, we've worn all this pink, we've marched, we've run, and we're still doing the same old thing we did when we started. And there's still 40,000 women in this country dying of breast cancer a year. So with all our screening, we haven't decreased the number of deaths. And so what we really need to do, I think, is refocus. We need to focus away from figuring out breast cancer and how the molecular biology is to figuring out what's the cause in the first place. And to do that, we need to do research on women. We can't do it on rats and mice and petri dishes. We need to actually look at the people who are getting it. Rats and mice don't get breast cancer. Women are, and domesticated dogs, non-spayed domesticated dogs, are the only animals that get breast cancer. So we have to give it to rats and mice in order to study it. If you don't do the research on women, you're not going to figure it out. Now, when I go to scientists and I say, why are you doing research on rats and mice? Why don't you do this on women? A scientist actually said to me, because women are too messy. I can't control them. With rats and mice, I can control what they eat. I can control what they do. I can control their genes. It's nice, pretty science. And it is. It's nice, pretty science, but it doesn't solve the problem because most of the things we find in the rats and mice don't translate. So the other thing he said was, and I don't know how to find women anyway. And I said, well, that I can solve. That I know how to do. And so the Army of Women, with the funding from Avon, is recruiting 1 million women around the country who are willing to put their bodies on the line, to participate in research, to find the answers. It's really a glorified email list. It sounds very fancy, but you sign up. We don't take a lot of information. And then scientists come to us with their research. We vet it. And then we e-blast it out to everybody in the Army. And we have 356,000 women right now. 80% of them have never had breast cancer. So women are very altruistic. They are willing to do it. And if we have enough of them, we will force the scientists to shift. And we're going to do it.
So that was a video by Makers. That was approximately 10 years ago. It was a PBS video. That was Dr. Susan Love. And let me get into more about Dr. Susan Love. Because she died this week, and I want to honor her. So I will briefly go over what's in this Wikipedia article about her. But Susan Margaret Love was born in 1948. She died this week, July 2nd, 2023. She was a prominent advocate of preventive breast cancer research and an author, regarded as one of the most respected women's health specialists in the United States. She was best known for pioneering work fueled by her criticism of the medical establishment's paternalistic treatment of women. In fact, in the news story I saw today, she was talking about the fact that as a cancer doctor, male cancer doctors would send their female cancer patients with breast cancer to her because they knew that she was better able to treat them. And that's literally what they would tell her. They didn't know how to treat women. They didn't know how to deal with the emotional thing that goes with a woman, having breast cancer, the probability of her losing her breast, what that means to a woman. It's really strange in a way, because a man should, almost think about the same way if he has testicular cancer and he has to lose that part of his body. There is a parallel, so to speak, but there are other parallels. I mean, obviously, testicular cancer is better equated to endometrial cancer, but a man would understand if he was going to lose something that he thought was the foundation of his manhood. Anyway, she was an early advocate for cancer surgery that conserves as much breast tissue as possible, and she said that these doctors, the male doctors, her colleagues in the hospital, would send the women to her because they knew that she had the knowledge and the wherewithal to do as much as she could to save as much of their breasts as possible. They tended to be, it's got cancer in it, let's just cut it off, essentially. Okay, it says here she was also among the first to sound the alarm on risk of routine hormone replacement therapy for menopausal women. It goes into her background, where she got a degree. She came out as a lesbian early in her career, and she knew that this could carry grave personal and professional risks. She later fought to expand the rights of same-sex couples as parents, and in 1993, she and her partner, Dr. Helen Kuksky, made history by getting approval for the first joint adoption by a gay couple from the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, a state that did not recognize same-sex marriage at the time. They married in San Francisco in 2004. So she was a leader in all respects. She pushed the envelope forward medically. She pushed the envelope forward relationship-wise. In 2012, she announced that she was diagnosed with leukemia and would take a leave of absence to pursue chemotherapy treatment. She returned to work the following year, but died from a recurrence of the disease on July 2nd, 2023, at the age of 75. So she did live to 75. Talks about her career. She sought not so much to cure the disease of breast cancer, but to vanquish it altogether by isolating its causes and preempting them on a cellular level. And you heard her in the video describe the fact that the only real way to get to the heart of breast cancer is to actually examine women who have it, or examine our closest relative in the animal kingdom, that being dogs. So those are the only mammals that get this type of cancer. Goes into more detail about her thing, and there's more about her biography and so on, but I just thought that we really should honor her because she was a groundbreaker in her career. So thank you, Dr. Suzanne Love. Only 8 years older than you. Yeah. Casper says, what an amazing lady. Yes, she was. This is one of my first stories, got from Threads. Comes through Midas Touch. Going to open the actual story on NBC. So this is an interesting thing. Trump-appointed judge gives a break to Jan 6 writer who wants to be a police officer. Is that scary or what? Tyler Bench, who used bear spray during the Capitol attack, was sentenced to probation and 60 days home detention instead of 9 months in prison sought by prosecutors. Story in NBC News by Ryan J. Raleigh and is from 2 days ago. This judge was nominated by former President Donald Trump. The judge's name is Trevor McFadden. He's a U.S. District Judge. Bench, who pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts in connection with the riot, got 2 years probation and 60 days home incarceration. But prosecutors requested 9 months, as I said earlier. This is what the judge said. You participated in a national embarrassment. You came ready for trouble. But the judge added that Bench's involvement was, quote, pretty minor when compared to others, while noting that his age was a mitigating factor. Bench is just 19 years old at the time. Nick says, any updates on that Avron research into breast cancer? I'll have to look into that. Let's see. Judge said, I'm giving you this break because of your age at the time and lack of criminal history. This doesn't need to define you or your life. Bench was arrested in August alongside members of the B Squad who were associated with the far-right 3% movement and Guardians of Freedom, as well as Jeremy Liggett, a far-right extremist who ran unsuccessfully for congressional House seat last year. He pleaded guilty to disorderly and disruptive conduct on restricted grounds, along with theft of government property, admitting that he helped carry a stolen police shield from the grounds of the Capitol. In an interview with the FBI after his arrest, he said that B Squad members took part in firearms training and had hand-to-hand combat training ahead of the attack. In the sentencing memo, the federal prosecutors said Bench shall push others toward the violence, those are their words, and carried a chemical irritant spray, which prosecutors said in court was bear spray. Bench deployed the spray, quote, against another rider that day. A tearful Bench did not speak during Friday's sentencing hearing, but his court-appointed attorney, Peter Cooper, said the Florida man deeply regretted his action. Bench, Cooper said, didn't have the maturity, these are Cooper's words, didn't have the maturity to understand what he was getting into and carries great remorse for what he did that day. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. That's what his lawyer is saying, because that's what his lawyer is saying to get him off. Cooper went on to say that Bench hopes to start a career in law enforcement. That's disturbing, adding that it's not beyond the realm of possibility that he could do so even with his misdemeanors. Again, very disturbing. A guy who went and rioted at the Capitol should not be a person that is in law enforcement unless he has a lot of counseling, a lot of testing. It's very scary to think that somebody that would take the law into his own hands would be given the power to exert the law against others. Very, very scary. Bench is currently working for a pool cleaning company, and the conditions of his sentence will allow him to leave his home for employment during his 60 days of home detention. Bench's case was the impetus for the departure of self-proclaimed FBI whistleblower to take his complaints to the Republican member of Congress, Steve Friend, a former FBI special agent who was based in Florida at the time of Bench's arrest, had been scheduled to transport Bench but refused to do so. Friend, according to a book he authorized, told other FBI employees that he didn't think that rioters who assaulted officers on Jan 6 should be charged. Again, another person who shouldn't be in a law enforcement position. He later testified before the GOP-led House Select Subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. Again, a wacko, a wacko, a wacko. A new panel that is focused on allegations that the government is unfairly targeting conservatives. Friends said he believed that federal authorities were bringing Jan 6 defendants to the gallows. No, they didn't. They didn't bring anybody to the gallows. Ain't nobody got a gallows except for people that put up a gallows on January 6, 2021. So you cannot redirect what they did and try to say that the United States of America is going to string them up by a gallows, because it's just not going to happen. We don't do that in this country. We haven't done that for years and years and years. They don't stand a chance if they go to court, friends said. Dude, I mean, look, this dude got off easy. So your assessment is a lie. And there's been plenty of people who have pled guilty who have got off easy. So again, Mr. Friend, your assessment is a lie. Retire, go away. Don't ever be in the FBI again. Don't ever be in law enforcement again. And for that matter, if you're so inclined, leave the United States, because the hamster's running in your head, but your brain's not working. Rioters have been acquitted on many charges by both jurors and judges, with McFadden acquitting Gen 6 defendant Matthew Martin a few months before Friend was supposed to help transport Bench. McFadden on Friday also sentenced Spence co-defendant Jonathan Rockholt to 5 months in federal prison. Prosecutors had sought 13 months. The Senate confirmed McFadden in 2017 with the 84-10 vote, with all opposition coming from Democrats. Democrats' vote was appropriate. Too bad there weren't more of them. In a separate Gen 6 case, Friday, Barry Ramey was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Prosecutors had initially requested 9 years in prison with a Proud Boy member who struck 2 officers with pepper spray. But U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedman said that would create an unwarranted sentencing disparity. More than 1,000 people have been charged in connection with Jan 6 attack, and more than 300 have been sentenced to periods of incarceration. The longest sentence, 18 years, went to Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, who was convicted of seditious conspiracy. Yes, Rhodes at least got what he deserved. Maybe he should have got more. Not really sure what the sentencing guidelines are for that. But you see over and over again that these Trump people, just seem to get away with it. Yvonne, research. Into breast cancer. Dr. Love. So Nick Rich, apparently there is something called Dr. Susan Love Research, the Love Research Army. That's probably where you can find out a lot more about her research. I'm not going to go into all that detail. I will let you go into it yourself. What I will do is I will put the website in the chat, and I will put it up on the screen. So I will leave that up there for a little while so you can study that and write that down. Nick Rich says the rioters all had the same idea about stopping the peaceful transfer of power, all of them. Yes, they did. Whether they understood what they were doing or not, they still committed insurrection. So this link on screen right now is Dr. Susan Love Research.org. and /love-research-army. So that will allow you to learn more. Nick, while you're here, because I'm not sure how late you're staying tonight, I want to go through another non-political story, because this is an interesting one. So a lot of you know about, hopefully I can get through this without ads. A lot of you know about the fact that the space shuttle last flew in 2011. If you didn't know, now you do. And after the space shuttle flew, the various components of the space shuttle went to various museums. Well, one of those space shuttles is going to be reassembled. So that's what this article is about. NASA's Space Shuttle Endeavour will stand tall once more. The trusty old shuttle is being made into a museum display, and it'll be the first time the 20-story spacecraft is fully stacked outside of the NASA facility. This is by Passant Rabi, and it was updated Thursday, and it is in the Gizmodo website. And I need to make that bigger. And this is filled with ads. But Space Shuttle Endeavour performed its final launch on May 16, 2011. It's going to look launch ready again, although this time the retired spacecraft won't be firing its engines. California Science Center is ready to kick off a 6-month-long process to stack the components of the Endeavour space shuttle into a vertical launch pad position so that it can go on display at the future Samuel Oschin Air and Space Center, which is currently under construction. The Science Center announced this on Thursday. The museum's Go for Stack process is set to begin July 20, which marks Space Exploration Day. The display will include the Endeavour orbiter, which embarked on the first mission with the Space Shuttle program in 1992. The shuttle's solid rocket boosters and external tank. Once fully stacked, the 20-story tall vertical display will be the only, quote, ready for launch space shuttle system in the world in terms of staging and appearance. It won't actually be ready for launch. It just will look like it does when it is on the pad. So you will actually be able to go up to it. I'm not sure how close you'll get to it, but you'll be able to see it the way it really looks, and you'll be able to see it at this museum, and that will be awesome because, hopefully it will be less expensive to go to the museum than it is to, no offense to NASA, go get a ticket to Kennedy Space Center. But obviously right now at Kennedy Space Center, you can't see a shuttle because the only shuttle that you see at Kennedy Space Center right now at the visitor center is a mock-up on the outside, which I actually haven't been over there yet, but that's coming sooner or later. But there is a mock-up of the shuttle on the outside, so that's not a real shuttle on the outside. And the real shuttle is on the inside. That is the real shuttle, and you can look at it from below, and you go up to like a second floor balcony type thing. And I'm looking forward to this, and look it over. You can't actually touch it; you can look it over. But Endeavour will be the star attraction at the Samuel Oschin Air and Space Center, a launch pad for creativity and innovation that will inspire future generations of scientists, engineers, and explorers, said Jeff Rudolph, president and CEO of the California Science Center, in a statement. getting the space shuttle pieces stacked on top of one another is not going to be an easy feat. And I got to say, as a space shuttle lover and observer, I personally hope they use some people who have actually done this before to help them do it. I hope they don't. I mean, no disrespect to people who lift things on a regular basis with cranes and so on, but really, if you're going to touch an artifact that is an actual real flown space shuttle, I hope you're going to use a team of people that know how to handle that artifact correctly and make sure that it doesn't get damaged. Just my opinion. And it's going to be the first time it's ever been done outside of a NASA facility, according to the California Science Center. Yes, because shuttles were stacked always at primarily at Kennedy Space Center for launch. Occasionally, they were stacked at Vandenberg. There were a few launches that occurred at Vandenberg. First part of the process involves installing the rocket's aft skirts, a pair of skirt-shaped bottom segments that form the base of the solid rocket boosters. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, people hit the like. The solid rocket motors will be stacked on top of the aft skirts to form the solid rocket boosters. The shuttle's external tank, ET-94, will then be lifted into place, followed by the Endeavour orbiter, which would be lifted by a large crane and connected to the rest of the rocket stack. When it's all done, the full stack of the Space Shuttle launch system will stand 200 feet or 61 meters tall. Boy, that's going to be pretty. I can't wait. I know. Now I have to go to California to go see the Space Shuttle. It's like, yes, I want to see it. Becoming the main attraction around which the Air and Space Center building will be constructed. Yep, build the darn thing and put the Space Center around it, because you won't be able to pull the damn thing into the Space Center after you you built it. Endeavour has been on display at the California Science Center for the past 11 years, albeit laying horizontally, then standing straight as though it's ready to soar through the skies once more. So this will be a big thing. It landed for the final time on June 1st, 2011 at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, following a 16-day mission to the International Space Station. Following that landing, only one other shuttle mission took place, the Atlantis STS-135 mission, marking the end of NASA's 30-year-long shuttle era, which began in 1981. Okay, the article does not tell you, but the Endeavour to get from its landing at Kennedy Space Center had to be lifted on board the 747 shuttle transfer aircraft, and it had to be flown out of Kennedy Space Center to that science center. So a lot of people watched it fly away for the last time. Because normally, now I could be wrong, but normally the shuttle was processed here, I believe. And only if a shuttle had to actually go to Vandenberg for such a mission did a shuttle get on the 747 aircraft to go from Florida to California. Most of the time when the shuttle got on the 747 aircraft, it was because it landed at Vandenberg and needed to come back to Florida, or it landed at White Sands, New Mexico, and had to come back to Florida. So it was unique to watch it fly out. And I had to watch them all fly out. So, okay, what to do next? I think I'll go over a little bit of Meet the Press. See if I can scroll to what I really want to play. Here's the text. I think this is the episode. I don't know. I had it earlier. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
This Sunday, The Outsider. North Dakota's Governor Doug Burgum is outspending all of his Republican presidential rivals.
So this Doug Burgum was one of the main people interviewed. Can I get this to? Can't tell if that pops it. Yeah, that pops it to full screen. That's what I want. So he was one of the main people interviewed. Not super excited about him. He mostly came across to me as kind of the lukewarm, old-fashioned candidate. You know, he thinks that he's going to
judged by the company you keep.
My exclusive interview is his campaign economic message.
Bidenomics.
Business with Donald Trump.
I don't think so.
Why?
I guess I'll go back and
I just think that it's important that you're judged by the company you keep.
My exclusive interview from Fargo. Plus, Biden's economy.
Bidenomics is just another way of saying restoring the American dream.
President Biden crafts his campaign economic message.
Bidenomics means you pay more for everything in life.
I can't think.
that's what he thinks. You know, he thinks that's what everything is. But, you know, he disavows the whole fact that it's the Republicans who control a majority of business and control the oil industry and you know, pump all these things up.
Think of anything more un-American than what we're seeing in Biden's economy.
Does Biden
Can't think of anything more un-American than what we see in Biden's economy.
even need an economic message to win in 2024, or will issues like abortion matter more? I'll ask New Jersey's Democratic Governor, Phil Murphy. And civilian risk. The U.S. plans to send cluster munitions to Ukraine, despite concerns they could kill civilians. Why is a weapon that's banned by over 100 countries the best option now for Ukraine?
It was a very difficult decision on my part. The Ukrainians are running out of ammunition.
And joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News senior.
Okay, so he has his panel there too. So those were the topics on this show today. I'm hoping that I can get this to shuttle a bit. Let's see.
Wrapping up a messaging tour focused on the economic agenda that he is embracing and calling Bidenomics. Inflation has dropped for 11 straight months, from a high of 9.1% in June of last year to 4% this May. Unemployment.
So those are very good numbers. Biden should run on his record. People may not believe him, however, people that didn't vote for him previously and don't want to vote for him right now.
Stands at 3.6%. That is near a 50-year low. And 13 million jobs.
3.6% unemployment, near a 50-year low, and 209,000 jobs added in June. That is just wonderful.
Jobs have been added since Biden took office. We've completely recovered from the pandemic drop. But the American public is not feeling it. Just 34% of Americans approve of Biden's handling of the economy in a recent AP poll that was released at the end of June. And only 20%.
And you can guess why. It's because of inflation, which he really can't control. He can't control. I mean, he can do his best to control the oil price. I see you there, Trucker John. Trucker John says, the more they bitch about Bidenomics, the more I know it's working. Exactly. Nick Rich says military strategies should be under counsel and control of a civilian government.
Percent of voters believe the nation is on the right track, though voters have not felt good about the direction of the country for over a decade. And Biden is trying to persuade voters that the economy is better than they think it is.
And guess what? Bidenomics is working. I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. I'm here to say we have a plan that's turning things around quickly. It's about growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. Today's job shows that, jobs report, shows that Bidenomics is working.
Now, this is actually a familiar pivot for incumbent Democratic presidents in the last 30 years. Both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama had to make the case that their economic policies were working to a skeptical public as they were vying for a second term. And it's a necessary pivot for the Biden campaign. But ultimately, it could end up being that the culture war issues like abortion that Democrats end up rallying around, especially as the Republican Party continues to focus even more time on cultural issues.
I agree with that. I really do think that we need to focus on the cultural issues, because if you can get people to realize that a lot of this abortion talk is really about a woman's right to choose, but also a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy when it's going to kill her, because semantics have it such that, a DNC is described as an abortion in medical circles. But a DNC is a life-saving procedure. It's not an abortion. It's something done to save the woman's life when the child is going to take the woman's life, or when the child is already dead. And these Republicans who actually think that a woman should give birth to a dead child because of their religious beliefs, that, everything has to proceed naturally and quote unquote according to God, it's just bullshit. Complete and total bullshit. When we have a healthcare system that has existed as long as our healthcare system has, and we've come as far as we've come in healthcare, it is bullshit to make a woman die just because you want to live in 1776 or the 1880s or whatever year you want to live in as a Republican. You cannot take women back to the dark ages, to the back rooms, to get medical procedures. This should not be happening.
School bureaucrats do not know better than parents. We've got to go and defeat them from the ground up and let them know that we are not going to have this indoctrination in there.
We are going to end men.
Every time they say that, we're not going to have indoctrination in there. What you're doing, Nikki Haley, is indoctrinating people. Why don't you tell the truth? Why don't you talk about the fact that you want your way and you can't stand it when you don't get your way? Oh, but you can't tell the truth, because if you told the truth, you wouldn't get a single vote from anybody other than your wild constituents.
And joining women's teams.
Identifying.
So, in that clip, Trump is worried about men joining women's teams. What's DeSantis going to be worried about?
Donald Trump is really being a pioneer in injecting gender ideology into the mainstream, where he was having men compete against women in his beauty pageants.
And in fact,
listen to him. DeSantis says that Trump was a guy who pushed the gender stuff by having men compete as women in his beauty pageants. Boy, is DeSantis a revisionist. Dude is off of his rocker. He really is.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's trailing Donald Trump by 30 points in many national primary matchups, continues to try to run to the right of Trump on these social issues like abortion and LGBTQ rights. In fact, this week, DeSantis' rapid response team reposted a video on Twitter attacking Trump for formally expressing support for the LGBTQ community. The video was criticized even by Republicans and has since been taken down. Now, one Republican candidate who is already outspending all of his rivals right now in advertising in Iowa and New Hampshire is betting that there is a lane for a Republican candidate that is solely focused on the economy and national security rather than on what he calls anti-wokeness. On Friday, I traveled to Fargo, North Dakota.
Okay, so this is his interview with this candidate. I'll let you watch it on your own. You know, this guy is more of a traditionalist Republican. In a different world, Doug Burgum, I'm going to solo that so you can see his name. In a different world, this guy may actually get a vote. He may get a few votes, but he won't get a lot of votes in the present day where people are too divided. You can watch the video on NBC. You know, I'm not gonna waste your time with this tonight. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to shuttle it. So you're gonna watch me poke and poke here to try to get it to shuttle. You thought DeSantis was being sarcastic? DeSantis is not sarcastic anymore. He knows he has to attack Trump. He knows he has to take on Trump head on. He has to discredit Trump in order to try to steal votes from him. Okay, that's what I want. So let's see. I'm not sure. I guess I'll just play it and see where I am.
Democratic Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. He was, for what it's worth, once considered a potential presidential candidate himself, had Biden decided not to seek a second term. Murphy, of course, is now a member of the Biden-Harris Campaign National Advisory Board, so there's no more talk of that. Governor Murphy, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Greetings from the Jersey Shore, Chuck. Great to be with you.
I appreciate that. Let me start with this idea of Bidenomics. As you know, the public doesn't believe that this administration is doing well on the economy. Obviously, you believe differently. Why do you think voters don't buy into Bidenomics yet?
Yeah, I think there's a lead lag factor here, Chuck. First of all, the facts speak for themselves. 13 million jobs created. I think unemployment below 4% for the longest stretch in 50 years. It's a middle class, a middle out, bottom up approach. I look back at 40 years ago this summer, even the great communicator himself, Ronald Reagan, was struggling to get the message through that the economy had already begun its recovery in the previous year. Ultimately.
So imagine that, you know, Reagan had trouble getting his message across about the economy. Andre responds to Trucker John. Trucker John said, I thought DeSantis was being sarcastic. And Andre responded, he's like Trump. He doesn't know sarcasm. Correct. He doesn't.
He went on to a landslide victory the next year. I'm not sure it's going to be a landslide, but the facts are on the side of the president and his administration. And I think eventually that seeps into the general sense of how the economy is.
Do you think this pessimism, though, is driven by the fact that the most likely voters, the people that pay the most attention, you know, nearly 20% of our electorate are retirees, right? And so the cost of living increases impact them more than those that are currently working. Not to say this doesn't impact everybody, but in some ways, a retiree is more sensitive to inflationary issues than somebody in the working world. And as you know, they're the most likely voter. How do you bridge that divide?
Yeah, I think your premise is exactly right. In fact, we just signed a budget with a massive property tax relief explicitly for seniors. Tomorrow, I'm going to sign a bunch of bills capping prescription drug prices for seniors again. But the facts, I think, in the Biden administration also speak to the reality that inflation is here. There's no question. But the United States over the past year is the leading deflationary country in the developed world. So I would say help is on the way, and there's an enormous focus, I know, by the president and his team on seniors and affordability, as there is here in Jersey.
But as you know, it looks like the stubborn inflation numbers mean we're going to have more interest rate hikes. and before you were in public service, you were in the finance world, you know what this means. A rise in interest rates is going to mean harder to get a car loan, harder to get that is not how you create the conditions to convince people the economy is humming.
And that is a problem. You know, we have the economy going where it's going, and people see the narrow, myopic view of their world, and they don't see the bigger picture a lot of times. And it doesn't help that the Republicans are constantly blaming Biden for everything, every price increase. You know, it just doesn't help at all.
Yeah, although I have to say, I'm not sure that the Federal Reserve has much choice. There's no question you raise interest rates another 25 or 50 basis points, there's short-term pain. You're absolutely right. But that pain is very small as compared to if inflation is allowed to reemerge and stay with us for many years. Sadly, that's tough medicine. But, you know, we're coming out of a pandemic, all of the extraordinary, unique realities associated with that. At a certain point in that respect, you may have no choice.
Let me ask you about where we're coming in the general election. If this is a referendum, do you think the Democrats can avoid this being a referendum on Joe Biden's presidency? Or do you think that's a good thing if it's a referendum on Joe Biden's presidency?
Well, I certainly think it's a good thing if it's based on the track record, which is outstanding. We've talked about the economy. I think that story only gets better. His foreign policy, particularly leading the coalition against this brutal war of aggression by Russia, has been a masterclass. Sadly, I think folks vote more. They vote less on that front, but it's a reality. Those are two very powerful engines. And I think when the facts are on your side, I'd rather be playing that hand than a hand that doesn't have the facts on their side and is making a lot of noise.
Do you believe that Donald Trump presents?
Okay, so he says, you know, he'd rather be playing Biden's side, basically having the facts on his side, than being these Republicans to, you know, constantly fabricate things and have no facts on their side. Good evening, Jim, and welcome. Nick says being optimistic doesn't hurt. Yeah, but you got to be real careful about being optimistic around some people, because some people are hurting, and so, you know, they can't see your optimism or understand it. So get back to the video.
The best contrast for Joe Biden's reelection, or are there other candidates that you think would be easier for Joe Biden to face?
I don't know that. I think this, Chuck. I believe a strong economy and a powerful foreign policy hand, and the president has exhibited both. I think that's a winning hand no matter who they're up against. I'm not suggesting it's a runaway election like it was in 1984, but if you've got those two engines on your side, that to me is a winning hand no matter who you're up against.
A couple of quick political stories on the Supreme Court. Do you think it's time for Democrats to embrace this idea of changing how the court works, adding justices, term limits, or do you try to deal with the system that you have rather than change the system?
A lot of you will say, let's change the court and let's stop this one-sided court. Let's hear his answer, see what he has to say.
Yeah, as painful as this radical court has been, taking away rights and freedoms, I'm in the camp that you play within the rules. And I have to say that's a tough conclusion given the extremity of whether it's LGBTQ decisions, abortion, student loans, affirmative action, one gut punch after another. I think you still play within the rules.
The largest ever transportation grant from the federal government is coming to the tri-state area. $7 billion for this second tunnel, the most trafficked area in the country. This was a new tunnel for trains that was on the books to start being built in 2009. The project began. Chris Christie, your predecessor, killed it, decided to say no to this. Is this is this decision reaffirm Governor Christie's decision at the time, or is this going to now cost New Jersey taxpayers more?
Now, listen, the biggest policy mistake of the past 50 years in New Jersey was his decision to cancel the predecessor to this project. This is a game changer, and this is overwhelmingly supported by federal money. The tunnels that exist were built in 1910. They've been damaged severely over the years. This is 2 new rail tunnels under the Hudson River. It's a game changer for New Jersey commuters. But tragically, the project that was canceled by my predecessor would have been open 5 years ago. So we're going to get it, but it's sadly later than it should have been.
And does it cost more money now?
Oh, it definitely costs more money.
Right.
But we have no choice. This is the most congested. This is 20% of the American economy rides in these rails. And thousands of commuters from New Jersey go into New York every day. We have no choice.
Governor Phil Murphy, Democrat of New Jersey. Appreciate you coming on and spending your Sunday morning with us. Thank you, sir.
Okay, and I note in the chat that Jim says, but the court is not playing by the rules. Yeah, I know. It's something that you want to do. I mean, you want to bring the court back to normalcy. Just would be a lot better if we could get a Democratic House and Senate and maintain our Democratic President Biden, and in doing so, perhaps pass some legislation that would rein the court in, that would, keep them from having powerful lobbies decide what they're doing. I mean, the problem with changing the court before the election is it plays into the hands of the Republican Party, where they would say, see, Biden is controlling everything. He's doing this, he's doing that. And you really have to ask somebody if there's legal precedent to expand the court. You'd have to go into that history. So, it seems like a great idea until it loses you the election. So you have to be careful about that. Let's see where we are. I am going to mute that video and play it, because I think when they start talking to the panel, there's a couple of videos during the panel. Can the court overrule an executive order? Oh, this is one of the things that I wanted to do. Okay, let me put this back in here. I probably lost the setup part of the video. But this is an interesting part of today's show, where Chuck Todd shows him interviewing Trump 8 years ago.
In my very first sit down with Donald Trump back in 2015, I asked Mr. Trump for his take on this policy. His answer might surprise you. Take a listen. Affirmative action. Should we keep it? Yes or no?
I'm fine with affirmative action. I mean,
Should it be expanded, or it should be limited?
Well, it should be, you have to also go free market. You have to go capability. You have to do a lot of things. But I'm fine with affirmative action. We've lived with it for a long time, and I've lived with it for a long time. And I've had great relationships with lots of people. So I'm fine with it.
Should private companies be able to fire people because they're gay?
Well, it's a big discussion, and I guess it's getting a lot of negative rulings right now, that whole thing. And I'm willing to go with what the courts are saying.
And that is, you don't think a private company should be able to do that?
I don't think it should be a reason. I don't think it should be a reason.
It's nearly 8 years ago. When we come back, why Republicans are embracing the culture wars over the economy on the campaign trail. Panel is next.
So look at, candidate Trump talks totally different than President or post-President Trump. There is I think there's a bit in here somewhere. So I'll just unmute it when they get to the clips. But I will leave myself up so we don't have to listen to the whole panel thing.
All of the abbreviation. Is it globalist sellout and Paul Ryan and Karl Rove, acolyte, who's in the pocket of Wall Street donors at the Club for No Growth?
Donald Trump has spent over $20 million attacking me. That's more than he spent supporting Republican candidates in last year's midterm elections.
Booty fucking who? So he's whining about that. I think there's a few maybe more things in there. Here's more about Biden pushing his economic record.
Going to run on Bidenomics. I think they're going to say it. I think they're going to do it to appease Bernie Sanders, who says you should run on the economy.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to run on abortion and guns.
Sanders, by the way. I think the economy is a huge part of their message. They need something that tries to capture all the many things that they've done, including the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. All of those things. They're trying to get it all under one big umbrella. And look, White House officials will tell you it's not that it has to be all the way fixed by the time people are voting. They just want it to be trending better. They think that is definitely a strong message that voters will be voting on. But absolutely, you're going to see Vice President Harris out much more talking about issues like abortion rights, talking about voting rights, talking about those issues that we know they've been messaging on, more cultural, social things. That's going to be just as big a message for them.
Yeah,
as well they should. We really should be talking about all those things because those are the things that will win us the election.
How would you be handling the economic messaging here? Because voters.
So they talk about that further. I think that's enough on that. I don't remember if there's anything much else in here. I did watch the whole show. There's something in here about support for DeSantis campaign stalling. Unemployment rates. But there was other stuff on the morning shows this morning, so I don't have to concentrate solely on that one. So here's another Glenn Kirshner video. So okay.
So, friends, Donald Trump's dangerous statements and posts continue unabated, unaddressed, while the threat to those who are trying to hold Donald Trump accountable increases. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. Friends, Donald Trump is a danger. He's a danger to the community. He's a danger to society. He's a danger to American democracy. Donald Trump stands indicted for dozens of felony crimes, twice over, once in state court in New York, once in federal court in Florida, and yet he continues to say things and post things that are dangerous, that are reckless, that are not so thinly veiled calls to violence. Just a matter of a few days ago, he posted President Barack Obama's home address, and one of Trump's loyal followers, one of his supporters, read it, reposted it, armed himself, and headed to President Obama's home. Fortunately, he was arrested before he could get there. Then Donald Trump posted that Special Counsel Jack Smith, the man who is investigating and prosecuting Donald Trump federally, should, quote, be put out to rest, close quote. And now, some brand new reporting from the Washington Post. Headline: prosecutors in Trump classified documents case are facing threats. FBI says it's working with partner agencies to assess and respond to threats as classified documents prosecution moves forward. And that article reads in part: individual prosecutors involved in the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump are facing substantial harassment and threats online and elsewhere, according to extremism experts and the government official familiar with the matter. Experts in political extremism say organized threats of violence against government institutions are generally down since the January 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, in part because people have realized they could face legal consequences for taking action. Still, experts say they frequently observe violent rhetoric targeting people who are blamed for undermining the former president, not just prosecutors involved in the criminal investigations surrounding Trump, but also swing state election workers refuting false claims of voter fraud. Far-right Trump supporters are posting the names of prosecutors and government workers online and yelling them at demonstrations, threatening them, and sometimes revealing details about their personal lives, the experts said. At the Justice Department, officials have responded by trying to keep the names of prosecutors and agents working the Trump cases from becoming public in official documents, congressional hearings, and less formal conversations about the case. The former president has written social media posts directly attacking people involved in investigating him, including special counsel Jack Smith and the New York State judge handling a separate criminal indictment against Trump. Friends, Donald Trump is a danger to the community and a danger to anyone who seeks to hold him accountable for his crimes. And you know the ironic part? We actually have a remedy for that. If there's clear and convincing evidence that a defendant who is pending a felony trial poses a danger to others, a judge can and should detain that defendant pending trial. Clear and convincing evidence. That's the legal standard. So friends, let me ask you, is the evidence clear that Donald Trump presents a danger to others? Is the evidence convincing that Donald Trump presents a danger to others? If anybody else in this country, other than Donald Trump, stood indicted for dozens and dozens of felony crimes in both state court and in federal court, do you think that person would be detained pending trial? How about if that defendant posted a picture of himself swinging a baseball bat at the state court prosecutor who was handling his case? You think that person would be detained pending trial? How about if that person posted something like, yeah, the special counsel, the federal prosecutor proceeding against me should be put out to rest? You think that person would be detained pending trial? You know the answer to that. The fact that we sacrifice everybody's safety to Donald Trump, we permit his dangerous, inflammatory, violent rhetoric to go unchecked, unaddressed, unabated, to the detriment of prosecutors and their families, judges and their families, witnesses, jurors, is really inexplicable and entirely unjust. And justice matters.
Thank you, Glenn Kirshner. That is another stellar reporting on things that are going on with Trump. And you are a great source, and we're happy that you allow us to show your videos. So I did mention that there were other things besides Face the Nation. Excuse me. Other things besides Meet the Press. And of course, that was Face the Nation. So here's Face the Nation. I'm going to mute it. I'm going to get it to where I want to have it. So let's see if I can do that and get it to the part of the video that I want it to go to. Right now it's on an advertising. You get to see some zoo animals because this is a Brevard Zoo ad. This is a zoo in the community in which I live, the Brevard County Zoo. Not really giving them an ad, but at least we're not playing their music, so we shouldn't get a copyright whatever on that, whatever. Okay, so Face the Nation. Here's the logo and all that sort of thing. And let's see if I can shuttle this to where I want it to be. So I don't want to show you the entire show. That would obviously get me with the copyright police. Let's see if I can get to the part that I wanted to talk about. Because we did have a discussion earlier about this. There we go. That's what I want. And of course, we got another ad, so we'll have to wait for that. But there was this discussion about the type of weaponry that the United States was giving to the Ukraine. And this is the spokesperson for the Ukraine who is going to explain that and how it's going to be used. So I wanted to go over that. Wait for the commercial to end. Another commercial. Couple of commercials. Probably just put myself up till those commercials run out. Nothing like a 50-some minute or 1 minute long, 50-some seconds, 45 more seconds to go in this thing, and I don't believe there's any way to skip the commercial, so I will just talk to you in the meantime. But again, thank you to Glenn Kirshner for the videos that we showed earlier. About 30 seconds-ish. 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21. And then these ads will be over. Hopefully not starting another ad. Five, four, three, two, one.
Support and ultimately a path toward NATO membership. Margaret?
Charlie D'Agata, thank you. We'll be right back.
And more advertisements, just what we need. Don't you just love it? It's like you try to get past everything and try to wait for the advertisements, and what do? You get more of them. So how do you like the show so far this evening? Gone about an hour and 28 minutes. Is there anything you really want to talk about? If there was a way to stop this and time this and have a timer and so on and so on and so on, then maybe I could play something else in the interim. But probably by the time I start something else, I'd have conflicting videos. So hope I'm making money off the ads. I wish, Jim. Freedom of Speech and You is not monetized. Maybe someday soon it will be. I don't know. Maybe I'll have enough viewers at some point. Right now, I'm just happy to have you out there. About 45 seconds ago, hopefully. You're really enjoying the show so far. Thank you, Casper. Lots of thumbs up from Trucker John, so thank you. About 25 seconds to go. Hopefully that's all the ads in this thing. Ten seconds to go. 5 seconds.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We turn now to the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Markarova. Great to have you back with us.
Good morning.
Your president and our president said that Ukraine's running out of ammunition. So how quickly will this latest U.S. package arrive, and how quickly will it make a difference?
Well, first of all, let me say how grateful we are to President Biden and to everyone for making this decision to provide us with this munition. I know everyone is discussing how difficult it was and sometimes even call it controversial, but there is nothing controversial about it. We are fighting on our territory, brutal enemy. There is nothing worse than tortures, rapes, and everything that Russians do on the territories they occupy, and we need to liberate as quick as possible. So we're really grateful that in times when we do need increased numbers of munitions to support our counteroffensive, that U.S. made the decision, and we really hope we will see it very quickly on the battlefield.
So these cluster munitions drop bomblets, and sometimes those bomblets don't explode right away. And years later, they can be a danger. I've met victims who've been blinded and maimed in places where the U.S. dropped these decades ago.
So hopefully I don't get into a lot of more ads by pausing it, but these are cluster munitions were mentioned earlier on the I just showed it. Meet the Press. And I think on that show, the Republican political candidate that was interviewed on that show was probably the only person who really talked about it, except for maybe the panel. I wanted to show this show, which is Face the Nation, which comes from CBS, not NBC. And my reasoning is because you get it from the Ukrainian point of view. So let's hope that we can go back without incurring ads. Let's see.
So when the White House says that Ukraine has made assurances on how it will use these. How do you do this and assure that civilians won't be hurt?
Well, first of all, let's remind where we start with. Ukraine is the most mined country now already. Russians mined everywhere. The unexploded ordnance is everywhere. So we're doing a lot of demining. And US, by the way, is helping us a lot in demining already now. With regard to these munitions that we will be getting from the US, first, they're of a much higher quality, so to start with. And second, as responsible as we are with all other American supplied or European supplied munitions, we are controlling it. We have a very responsible ways. We use the NATO type of log-fast system to record every unit that we have, where it is. We will use the same type of approach to this. We will know where we use it, how we used it. And of course, every time we liberate our territories, deminers are the first people that go there, try to make sure that the area is safe. So we will do exactly the same.
And I imagine Russia uses these on civilian areas. I have to imagine Ukraine has pledged not to do that and only to use them on soldiers.
Oh my God, they use this and phosphor and everything else specifically on civilian areas and destroying civilian areas.
And that's
we definitely we will not use it in civilian populated areas.
So you have a promise there to not use this material in civilian areas by the Ukraine, and you can bet that Russia will not ever make that promise. They use them wherever, willy-nilly, as she says, wherever they want. So big difference, big difference.
That's the war crime aspect that Russia has been criticized for on this. When you heard President Biden say Ukraine's not ready for NATO membership, what did you think?
We are getting ready for NATO membership. We know and we're doing very difficult reforms, even as we fight for it. What we're definitely ready for is for invitation. And I think, with regard to the NATO membership, if you look at any aspect of it, Ukraine is very ready in a number of aspects. And if there is something that is left there, we can sure do it later on. But we are discussing now about the invitation. You know that in 2008, the open door policy towards Ukraine have been adopted. We want not only the door to be open, we want to be invited to come in.
Well, the White House seemed to close the door on that part of the invitation, at least, but eventually allow for Ukraine to join NATO. That seemed to be the signal White House was sending on Friday.
Well, the discussions are still ongoing, and of course, it's the discussion that requires 31 countries to agree. And again, as with the European Union membership, there is a path towards the European Union. We are a candidate country, and we are working towards our full membership. Similar approach we take with NATO. We want to be in NATO. The majority of Ukrainians support Ukraine in NATO. This is in our constitution. And we have done the majority of reforms already to be NATO eligible. We are ready to continue on that path, and we would like to see that our friends in NATO are together with us on this path.
This week, the largest nuclear plant in Europe, once again, was very much in focus on the front line of this conflict. Your president says Ukraine has intelligence showing that Russia will try to blow it up, that it has mined the area. The UN watchdog says they've only been able to search parts of the area. So far, it looks okay, but there are 2 key reactors they want access to. What is the level of risk right now?
The level of risk there is consistently high since March 4th, 2022, since Russians illegally occupied Ukrainian nuclear station. So we just have to be very clear from the start, every time we discuss Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, the largest nuclear plant in Europe, that the only source of risk there is Russia. You add to that Russia's absolutely irresponsible withdrawal or suspension of the New START treaty, the decision to deploy the tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, and it's clear that we are dealing with a nuclear terrorist. Now, look at Chernobyl station, which they also grabbed since they invaded us in February 22. As soon as Russians are out of there, there is no risk. Similar here, we all have to work together to get them out. Because again, let me remind you about the Kakhovka Dam destruction, which Russians did knowing how devastating it will be. So the intent, and there is no red lines for them there. We just have to stay focused and get them out from the station. As soon as it's in Ukrainian hands fully again, there will be no risks.
Does Ukraine support what the UN's calling for, which is, sort of a safe zone around it so that Ukraine isn't shelling in the area and neither is Russia?
Look, all Ukraine should be demilitarized from Russian military. So we have to get them out from everywhere in Ukraine, not to allow them create some safe zones for them inside Ukraine. We are very responsible, as you have seen during all this period, towards the Zaporizhzhia nuclear station. But the only answer to that problem is no Russians there. It's Ukrainian territory, it's Ukrainian station, and there should not be occupiers, brutal occupiers there.
We will be watching what happens this week at NATO, and so good to have you back with us, Ambassador. We'll be right back.
So typically I don't go into things Ukraine, but I just could not resist showing that today because I really wanted to show that today. And I hope I don't get a copyright strike for showing it mostly undisturbed. But I did think that you needed to hear what she had to say because it was very good. So. We've talked about this a couple of times. People have. This is something that was going around. Got this through Rachel Maddow on Threads. And so this is one of her articles, I believe. Yes, it's from her blog. But this is, you like the lady in blue. Okay. Yes, she was a very good representative for our country. So a DC disciplinary panel has said that Rudy Giuliani has earned disbarment. Lawyers in Trump's orbit are facing serious legal troubles. Others are facing disbarment. Unfortunately for Giuliani, he's in both categories. This is by Steve Bannon on MSNBC, so it's not by Rachel herself, but it is an NBC article. So I can make it a little better. When it comes to the lawyers in Donald Trump's orbit who are facing rather serious challenges, there's a handful of categories. There's some who are facing unpleasant scrutiny from the special counsel's office as part of its investigation. There's one Trump lawyer whose work is currently being used against his own client. Are there Americans in Ukraine sweeping for mines? I don't know. I don't know, WW. You would think so. But let's not forget the attorneys from Trump's team who are also dealing with disciplinary issues. Ellen Wood, for example, were tried this week to preempt a process that might very well have led to his disbarment. John Eastman is currently facing 11 disciplinary charges in the state bar in California. It's entirely possible that he will soon be disbarred. He was the one who played a leading role in the scheme to try to keep Trump in power despite his defeat. Jeffrey Clark, highly controversial assistant attorney general in Trump's Justice Department, is facing possible disciplinary action from District of Columbia Bar in response to Republican lawyers' post-2020 election efforts. And then there's Giuliani. So Politico reported this afternoon, according to the date of the article being, that's the date of the article, the July 7th, Friday. Washington, D.C.-based Bar Discipline Committee concluded Friday that Giuliani should be disbarred for frivolous those are their words, and destructive, their word, efforts to derail the 2020 presidential election in support of former President Donald Trump. Committee comprised of D.C. attorneys tasked with reviewing Giuliani's conduct deliberated for months after weeks-long series of hearings that feature testimony from Giuliani and several of his close associates. The article says that Giuliani concocted a series of outlandish excuses for his alleged misconduct. Not surprisingly, they didn't prove to be persuasive. A 3-member panel declared in a 38-page decision he claimed massive election fraud but had no evidence of it. By prosecuting that destructive case, Giuliani, a sworn officer of court, forfeited his right to practice law. There's your answer, WW. U.S. has sent some mine-clearing vehicles. Same panel acknowledged of some of the more worthwhile parts of Giuliani's early record before concluding the misconduct. They said, here sadly transcends all his past accomplishments. It has unparalleled in its destructive purpose and effect. He sought to disrupt the presidential election and persists in his refusal to acknowledge the wrong he has done. Those are their words. This is not a final word on the subject. Given today's findings, Giuliani has no reason to be optimistic about his professional future. Complicating matters is the scope of his flailing career. New York appeals court has already suspended his law license. They said he made demonstrably false and misleading statements about the 2020 election. And he's received attention from Jack Smith's office. He was recently smacked with discovery sanctions. He's facing a credible defamation lawsuit from former Georgia election workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. And he's facing another credible defamation lawsuit from Dominion Voting Systems. To put it another way, Giuliani's professional life has gone from bad to worse, and the floor may drop yet further. Hooray, hooray, hooray. Giuliani should pay for his crimes. Okay. Da-dee-da-dee-da. President Biden is going to the United Kingdom. He's going to meet King Charles for the first time that Charles is the King of England. But there's other things going on. And this article in Politico says, British ambassador spills the tea on Biden, Sunak, and Ukraine. Karen Pierce, British ambassador to the United States, shares what King Charles and Rishi Sunak hope to get out of Joe Biden's trip to the United Kingdom and how the war in Ukraine is driving these two allies closer and occasionally further apart. This is by the political staff. It's also from July 7th, Friday. Biden is headed to Europe this weekend, his first stop being the United Kingdom. He's scheduled to meet with the Royal Highness King Charles and the Right Honorable Rishi Sunak, Britain's Prime Minister and fellow head of government, who just visited Biden in Washington this past month. On the agenda for the meetings is climate change, the war in Ukraine, the Atlantic Declaration. That's the diplomatic term for Biden and Sunak's push to renew the UK and America's partnership across a host of economic and security issues facing the West. Karen Pierce is joining to talk about these issues. She's the British ambassador to the United States. She's one of the most UK experienced diplomats, having held an array of senior positions, including ambassadorships to the United Nations, the World Trade Organization in Afghanistan, as well as directing British policy throughout South Asia, Pakistan, and Afghanistan during some key years of the War on Terror. Good night, Nick Rich. Nick Rich, there is a late launch tonight. If you're still listening, 11:58 p.m. Eastern, you'll probably be asleep. Don't know if it's going to go because that is the last opportunity for today's date. If it doesn't go at that time, it's a Starlink mission. It's probably going to go on tomorrow evening. And if it goes tomorrow evening, its time frame is closer to 8:30 p.m. hour, as I recall. But definitely in the 8 p.m. Eastern hour. We did have launch Friday. Also, if you're listening, we had a launch Friday of Starlink. It was from Vandenberg. It was approximately 3 p.m. on the East Coast, but it was a Pacific launch, so it was midday, closer to noon there. Pierce tells host and playback co-author Ryan Liza and what Sunak hopes to get out of Biden's trip to London, how Britain and America's relationship have changed throughout her many years of service, how the war in Ukraine is driving the two countries closer, but occasionally further apart, who Brits admire the most in our nation's history, and what our secrets are for dealing with cagey diplomats on the other side of the bargaining table. So I'm guessing that's in an audio podcast or another podcast. Is there a video there? Yeah, there's audio there. There's 36 minutes of audio. Because I didn't review the audio ahead of time, I would just point you to Politico and this article. The British ambassador spills the tea on Biden, Sunak, and Ukraine, and you can listen to it yourself. Should have listened to that. Okay, so that was one of the ones that I didn't go through quite as detailed as the others tonight. We have a few more things. Hurry back, Andrea, and take care of that sneeze. Okay. In entertainment news, July 8th, entertainment news, in case you didn't know. On July 8th, it was a final night of Elton John's tour. He said goodbye after over 50 years of touring with his last show in this farewell tour. There's a clip here. I don't know if it has audio, so I'm not going to play it. But apparently, here's Elton John with the president and the first lady. That Saturday night was his last show. He took the stage in Stockholm, Sweden. He said, "What a journey this tour has been, and now we find ourselves at the end of it. Tonight is the final night." The video that he posted includes a clip from a 2018 interview he did with CNN's Anderson Cooper, in which the musician announced his retirement from touring. So he announced that long ago. Not done performing, just done touring. That's probably so WW. He will probably do things. He just won't be touring. The tour kicked off in 2018, and it was originally meant to end in 2021, but COVID-19 postponed it. It featured more than 300 shows and was attended by more than 6 million fans across the world. 76-year-old musician headlined the Glastonbury Festival as his final UK stop on a farewell tour. In the interview with Anderson Cooper, he admitted his retirement from life on the road to focus on family. He has 2 sons with husband David Furnish. He said, we had children and it changed our lives in 2015. We sat down with their school schedule and we said, I'm going to miss too much of this. That's what he said in the interview. And he reiterates what you said, WW. He although he's done touring, he would continue to work on new music. So he'll still make music. So that's the story of Elton John. Would have been nice to see him, but not everyone is so lucky to actually see him. Lucky are the people that did. So that was the entertainment news. Had a quickie from John Fugel saying it's a joke. Something from Threads. Probably have to make it a lot bigger for you to see it. He says, the best part of the new Indiana Jones film is how every time he punches a Nazi, the Nazis call him woke. That's just another of Fugelsang's funny jokes. Way to go, John, to be funny and interesting. So obviously he's being sarcastic there. I'm sure there's a lot more to the film than that, but at least he doesn't spoil the film for you by making the joke. Okay. We have something interesting from 30 years ago. Here we are sitting here on the social media watching me do a show. About 30 years ago on the Today Show, they had an interesting thing, and it says, prefaced by Rachel Maddow, oh man. Today's Show said, it seems crazy to us now, but the internet was a new concept less than 30 years ago. Take a trip through time and then have a laugh as Katie Couric, Bryant Gumbel, and Elizabeth Vargas discussed the World Wide Web back in 1994. So hopefully
Allison, can you explain what internet is? Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC. There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer network.
The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. I'm afraid that if I subscribe to something like internet,
you would really be hooked.
I would get hooked, and I would never, spend time with my family. Well, as I mentioned, I have no desire to be a part of the internet because I feel like I'm so inundated with information all the time that I don't want more. Don't you ever feel like it's just constant bombardment.
I don't know.
of
I guess the thing I'd resent
information.
most is I would resent that, at least when you're home, if the phone rings, you have the option of not answering it. On the internet, people can send you messages all the time people you don't even want to hear from.
Allison, can you explain what internet is? Oh, that's
So what do you think about that? I mean, that was 30 years ago. They didn't really even know what the internet was. They'd never experienced that. They were never, as host of that show, had any knowledge about what it was. Just goes to show you, like where we were 1994. And in 1994, President Clinton had been elected in 1992, so he took office on January 20, 1993. So he was in his second year, roughly, when that was airing. Okay. So I will show you this just to show you. They say that the launches at Vandenberg are really rainy and stuff. Okay, get it. Ads. And sometimes even in Florida, though, launches are launched, even though it's raining. But this was Vandenberg on Friday. And maybe Nick Rich will watch this later. But this was Vandenberg on Friday with the Starlink launch from there.
Which means the flight computers have taken over the launch countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And there's that call out that Falcon 9 is in startup. In a few seconds, we should hear our launch director, or LD, give the final go for launch.
Can you even see the rocket? I mean, it's there, but kind of blurry.
LD, go for launch.
And there's that go from the launch director to proceed with today's mission. So let's sit back and watch as Falcon 9 takes our 48 Starlink satellites into space.
T-minus 30 seconds. 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power. And liftoff of Starlink 513. Go Falcon, go Starlink.
Look at that, just wash of water in front of the lens.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. M1D chamber pressures are nominal.
That's the fuel tank.
Then as it gets above the lower atmosphere, the camera kind of clears up,
At T plus 30 seconds, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 4 East from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California at 12:29 p.m. Pacific time. Now, the next major milestone coming.
So I'm just going to roll it, there's engine burns and stuff, but I'm going to roll it up to the part.
The other half flying for its 7th time.
So now it's already separated. It's 3 minutes and something into flight. So 3 minutes, roughly about it's going to make a burn to slow the craft on the
Stage
left,
one,
which is
entry part
stage
startup.
1.
And there's that call out for the stage 1 entry burn, which you can see on the left side of your screen there.
Vehicles on a nominal trajectory.
Craft on the right is
Stage 1,
stage
which
2,
we also call
which
the
is
booster, has ignited
delivering the
3 engines
payload.
to slow it down for atmospheric re-entry.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And there's that call out that the entry burn on the first stage has completed. Coming up next is the landing burn on the first stage, which is the second and final burn in preparation for landing.
Stage 1, FTS has saved.
So they've turned off the flight termination system. That's what FTS is. That's the system that destroys stage 1 if it should veer off course. Then you lose the camera view. You heard the employees groan when you lost the camera view because they lost it first before we saw it.
Stage 1 transonic.
And there's that call out that the first stage is transonic, which means it is traveling near the speed of sound. Coming up in about 20 seconds from now, we should see the stage 1 landing burn start on the left side of your screen.
Stage 2 in terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn.
And there's confirmation that the stage 1 landing burn has started in preparation for touchdown on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, in the Pacific Ocean. We should also hear that call out for SECO, or second engine cutoff, in a few moments.
You can see the drone ship coming in view on the left side. And the legs go out. And she lands. Well, that's the landing. And they don't actually show us the
everyone
whole
here in Hawthorne is very
launch. I
excited
don't
that
know
this Falcon 9 first stage
particularly
is now
why they
successfully.
cut that. I don't know if there were technical issues with the feed or what, but it was interesting that they didn't show the delivery of the satellites, but whatever. For whatever reason, they didn't do that. Talked about that last week. I don't know why I didn't clear that off my list of things. If you are a night owl, still showing this at 11:58 Eastern time. So let me see if I can show this. But there is a launch that's supposed to occur tonight, potentially at 11:58 Eastern time. This is the description on the YouTube video. Let me see if I can get that to be big enough to make it visible. So SpaceX is targeting this evening, 11:58 Eastern, 3:58 UTC, July 10. That's for people doing time conversions. For those of you on the Pacific time zone, that's 8:58, so it's a lot easier for you to watch. For those of you in Central Time, it's 10:58. Again, a little bit easier on you to watch, depending on how late you go to bed. It's interesting that the mission from California had more than 40 Starlink satellites, and this one only has 22. So it makes me wonder if there is some kind of undeclared payload on this, and if that has something to do with the delay, some private payload. Although usually they say that there's some kind of military payload or something on it, but I don't know. Maybe they just put 22 on this because they only need to launch 22 at this time. That's an unusually low number because they should be able to get to over 40. There are fewer Starlink satellites on the current Falcon 9 launches, however, because the version 2 satellites that they're launching now are larger than the version 1s were. And the version 2 are the ones that have the satellite to satellite communication. So that's why they're larger. And it's also possible that the 40-some satellites from Vandenberg were the smaller incarnations of the version 2 without that capability. I don't know. You'd have to get into the inner workings of SpaceX to know why. So, but this does seem like an unusually low number of Starlinks for whatever reason. This mission originally was possibly going to go up at, I think it was 4:36 this morning, but they postponed it. They bumped it to 8:36 p.m. this evening, and then they bumped it to the final opportunity this evening of 11:58. And obviously, you can see the other opportunities are there. Could be 8:11 p.m. tomorrow Eastern, 9:02 p.m. Eastern, 9:52 p.m. Eastern, or 11:33 p.m. Eastern. It's the 16th flight for the first stage booster. That's a freaking record, I believe. And it tells you which missions it was used on. Crew Demo 2. That was the Doug and Bob mission. The NASA's 2, CRS-21. That's a crew resupply mission to the ISS. I don't know why I wanted to say IRS. ISS, International Space Station. Transporter 1 and 3, which are both missions which have multiple payloads, and 10 previous Starlink missions. This one will also land on a drone ship. It's going to land on Just Read the Instructions, which is stationed out in the Atlantic. Are there more rockets this week? Probably. This is just the one confirmed one that I know about. I can look and see. I tend to only talk about the missions that are confirmed. And even then, they change so frequently that I wind up reposting. Let's see, what do we have? So we have this one tonight. Yes, there's possibly one on July 13th at 2:06 a.m. Eastern. It is not confirmed yet. It is also a Starlink launch. So there could be 2 this week. We have others coming up. We have something coming up potentially on July 23rd, but again, it's not fully declared yet. It is called Jupiter 3. It takes place on a Falcon Heavy. It is a geostationary communications satellite built by Maxar Technologies for EchoStar. So that's a big communications satellite. Not something smaller like a Starlink, and it goes into geostationary orbit, whereas Starlink goes into LEO, low Earth orbit. Okay, we're beyond the 2-hour mark. I don't know if this has sound. But we got to have a cat video. So let's hope this doesn't have music on it. We don't get a copyright strike on this. So let's have a cat video to end this show. The description says, point of view. School starts at 7 a.m. And this is the protagonist at 6:59 a.m. Yep, that's some people, all right, at the early hour. So that was our cat video of the week. If you have any final thoughts, be sure to share them. But it's been 2 hours and 13 minutes almost. And I got to wind it down because I got an appointment in the morning. So how you doing tonight? Thank you again for your kind compliments, your likes, your participation in the show. And hope you enjoyed the cat video. I hope you come back next week. 16. So we should have a show next week. Okay? It's been a fun night with you all. I'm ready to call it a night. Thank you so much for being here for Freedom Speech and You. I'm Ken, and I will chat with you on the way out. Don't see any new things on Discord. I will double check that WW didn't send me anything. Okay, I don't see anything on there. So, yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate your compliments, and I appreciate your participation, and I appreciate our mods who do a wonderful job on this show. And we will talk to you later. And I'm going to do the outro.